Hey, this is Dave from the Adobe Character Animator team, and welcome to the December episode of Tips and Tricks. Today, the Community Spotlight kicks things off with a retired first sergeant, terraced swans, happy woodland creatures, and an interactive ghost display. Then we'll move on into the mailbox section where we answer your questions, including a workaround to a bug that you may have encountered in the latest release. And finally, we'll do some quick tips on how to add additional behaviors to your character to give more nuanced control over individual parts. Sounds good? All right, let's get started. First off, this month we've got Little Top by Josh King, and this is an animated military character who is a shining example of using Character Animator to create a brand. Josh must be doing something right because he's getting thousands of followers and views every day. And I was lucky enough to meet Josh at Adobe Max this year. He's actually a retired infantry first sergeant who spent 23 years in the military. And he said particularly his time in Iraq was where a lot of the Little Top inspiration came from. So he sent me a short video about some of his tips for other people looking to build a brand using Character Animator, and here's a look at some of the highlights.
Hey guys, this is Josh and Little Top, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we did to promote our brand, our character, and our website. I knew that my niche audience would be active military and veterans. Now out of the gate, I created my own Facebook page, at First Sergeant Little Top on Instagram, and a channel on YouTube. It was slow going at first. Of course, all my old Army buddies signed on, but getting it out to the rest of the world was tough, so I decided to do two things. First, I began using OBS along with Character Animator to do weekly live shows on Facebook and occasionally on YouTube. This worked really well because you're able to interact with people, talk to my partners out there. Next, I knew soldiers, Marines, and sailors loved their units. I started designing stickers featuring myself with Proud Veteran on it and did almost every Army division. Eventually, I started getting requests for certain units. And for me, it was a no-brainer. Now, we did promote some using Facebook. We knew that our demographic and our target audience was pretty niche. So we used Facebook's boosting ability, but targeted it towards the zip codes are within 25 miles of some of the bigger Army bases. So Fort Bragg, Fort Campbell, Fort Hood. So my advice is to use all the social media you can. I'd use Snapchat, use Instagram, use Facebook, anything you can to promote your brand. And also to take advantage of Cafe Press, Zazzle, Redbubble, which is my favorite, to upload your work to it. So then you have stickers available, you have t-shirts, you have all this content that supports the project you're trying to work on. I mean, look at this face. Everybody should have one of these on their wall, right? I am beautiful.
So great work, Josh. Congrats on all the success, and thank you for your service. Next up, we've got I Want to Work in a Shop by Fitbathatba. I think that's how you pronounce it. But they have created a 23-minute episode using Character Animator, After Effects, and Premiere. And it shows if you've got a funny script and voice actors, you can kind of take a more crude South Parkian approach to animation that kind of adds to the humor. In fact, these guys definitely know it because in their credits they say animation and art in quotation marks. But you know, maybe the terrorist dynamite strapped swans don't need to be fully cel shaded or look perfect. It's kind of quick and dirty, and it gets the job done. And it's always great to see long form content being made with Character Animator, and it seems like it's been a success for them, and it sounds like they're going to make a series out of this on YouTube. So congrats guys, and can't wait to see the next episode. EasyMech is a recently launched Swedish brand of creative building tools for kids. And this was a promotional piece done by Chris Ovamary, and he used multiple characters, this little beaver family that is kind of creating stuff together and deciding that, using EasyMech is better than building stuff with, logs and trunks and things like that. So it's some great After Effects compositing, a lot of nice background and foreground layers, depth of field, all of that stuff. It's just a really nice, polished piece. In fact, Chris also did his own 5-minute walkthrough of how he first got involved with Character Animator and making this character, and has some nice little tips and tricks in there. So awesome job, Chris, and looking forward to seeing more future work from you. And finally, you might recognize this character from an earlier tips and tricks video. We featured this guy, Brad Pig, who's a creation of Jim Fear, basically this pig who does movie and TV reviews and that sort of thing. But he did a live booth at a film and art expo and featured his main character, Brad Pig, talking to people and interacting with them. So they felt like they were talking to a cartoon character, as well as he had this little floating ghost thing that he did as well that would talk back and forth with people. So very cool. And it's a great way to draw in booth traffic. And I can attest to this from demoing at Comic-Con or VidCon or other events. Just when you have a character talking to you, people don't see that often, right? It's not a usual thing. And if the character can specifically talk about, your hair color or the shirt you're wearing, or ask you questions or stuff like that, it leads to engagement. And it's a really smart idea. So great to see Brad being used outside of YouTube and in real life situations. All right, we've got a couple of new mailbox questions this month, and our first one comes to us from Hassan Khalid, who writes, "Slight problem. When I drag the arm group's origin point to the shoulder, I don't see a green highlight. The shoulder does overlap the torso layer. So when I start recording, the shoulders still go loose from the torso." So what Hassan is talking about is, in the last release, we got rid of the old stapling independent parts, the staple tool and way to attach arms and legs to your character, and instead did this auto attach thing where things turn green when you overlap them and that sort of thing to attach. But the problem is, in some older artwork and artwork that you're importing and then making changes to, that automatic stuff might not show up. And that's a bug, and that's something we do hope to fix in the next release. But until then, here's the way to fix that. So let's go into rig mode for this character. All right, so this is only applicable to independent groups. So this is a group, it's got stuff in it, and it has the independent crown next to it. But notice as I'm moving the origin handle around where this thing is going to pivot and rotate from, nothing's happening. None of that green overlay stuff is happening. So the way I would fix that is, right now I have the handle selected. I need to deselect this and select this layer, this group right here, and then go over to Attach To and change that from whatever it's set to Auto. And doing that is going to give you the green circle, and then you will see the overlay when something is ready to attach to something else. So let's do the same thing for the left arm. I've got my left arm selected. I go to Attach To, change that to Auto, and that will turn it green, and now I can move it and connect it. So it's a bug. We hope to get it fixed soon, but that is the workaround for now. Next up, Liz Stender Art Name is asking, how do I make my stroke to vibrate a bit? The stroke usually is still, but I like to make a small movement in the stroke. How do I do this? Well, there's a couple ways you could go about this. First, if your artwork is vector, if it's made in Adobe Illustrator, it's an AI file, there is an option, the wiggler behavior, you could use. So if I go into rig mode and make sure that render as vector is checked over here, then I have the ability to add the wiggler behavior. And this has a little wiggliness parameter you can use. And if I go back to my scene, you can see that it's starting to wiggle everything. Now I put it at the top level of the character, which means everything is going to have this behavior applied to it. But if you just applied it to one group, let's say just the mouth group or just the outline, it would only affect that part. And then here with the wiggliness, you can see if I really up this, it's going to get really wiggly and move around quite a lot. So you've got a lot of control over that. But again, this only works currently for AI files, for vector artwork. Your second option is to do a cycle layers animation and just draw the same thing multiple times and just run cycle layers through it. Now, we showed this in a previous tips and tricks video, but just as a refresher, let's go into this character. So this is showing everything all at once, but basically every part, the eyebrows, the background, the pupils, all of them have cycle layers applied to them and basically were redrawn 3 times and just cycled through to kind of give it that live feeling. So it's a little more work up front to do it this way, but this is an effect that will work on Photoshop files as well. And I agree, it's a great effect. It works really well for certain types of characters, like a sketchbook style character. And I would definitely recommend trying it out. And honestly, it doesn't take that long to do, particularly for simple sketch style characters like this. A common practice that we see in a lot of puppets is adding a lot of behaviors to give them a lot of new special abilities. You want your character to walk, you add the walk behavior. You want your character to breathe, you add the breathe behavior. But I think people are just starting to get a grasp on adding a lot of different behaviors to different parts of your character to give them more individual control. So I'll show you what I mean in a couple of examples. First, this is Basil Giggleswick, made by fellow Adobe designer David Stokes. He's a great little character. He looks down here and says, "Oh no, like what's going on here?" and gets a little embarrassed, not wearing any clothes. But you'll notice the breathing here is really, really nicely done. And the reason it looks so good, and it looks good even in a zoomed out view here, is he added multiple breathe behaviors to different parts of his character and then fine-tuned the behavior details for each part. So we've got breathe in the arm groups, in the chest, in the leaf, in the head down, and in the default state, which is at the head in this case. And notice the breathe here is very small, so it's just going from 100% to 99%, or in some cases 98%, or going to 101. Very subtle changes, but because he's applied it to all these different parts, it has a great effect. Now notice for the head, for example, he's got this offset thing set to 2. If I turn that off, let's set this to 0, reset that back to its original what it would be. Notice the ear and the face, they're not doing that much. They're not moving that much. The offset allows them to move a little bit when it's inhaling, I believe is what it says when you roll over it. It says offset, distance to move breathe handles when breathing in. So by changing that to 2, he gets a lot more motion in the face and the ears. So it's just playing around. It's small, 1 or 2 value changes that are adding a dramatic effect to this character. So a lot of people, when they're bringing in a character, they are going to add their behaviors at the top level here. So walk or breathe or anything like that. But you may want to add multiple instances of it to give a little bit more nuance. So this character, he's got behaviors all over the place. And again, this column with the little Lego brick looking thing, that indicates that a behavior has been added at that level. And so you can see it's been added to the arm groups and the chest and the leaf and so on. So it's just something to think about. Make independent groups, add behaviors to them, and try doing it individually on different parts as opposed to one behavior to rule them all at the top level. It's going to give you a lot more control and nuance to your character. Another behavior that we probably don't see as much use as we could is the transform behavior. So by default, you bring a character in, you've got your transform controls down here. I can change position, scale, rotation, all of that stuff using these controls, which come in by default. However, you could add transform to individual parts, like the eyebrows, for example, to give them additional controls and be able to move or scale or rotate them as well. So let's go into rig mode for this character. And for him, I've got a brows group that includes the right eyebrow and left eyebrow inside of it. So what I can do, if I want to affect both of these at the same time, I can select it and add a new transform behavior to it. And that's going to give me all the controls I need. So if I go back to my scene and select my character, now I should see transform brows showing up over here. And this allows me to change the Y position of both of them. So if I wanted them to, fly off his head or something like that, I have the ability to do that. Rotation, I find, works really well because it gives you a little subtle, eyebrow arch. Sometimes you could do this for kind of a quizzical or confused or relieved look or something like that. Now, alternatively, I could remove this transform behavior. Let's get rid of that. And instead, select both of these and add 2 more transform behaviors, 1 for each eyebrow. Now, unfortunately, doing this is going to disable the webcam controls for the eyebrows, but this allows you a way to do manual control of the eyebrows by doing transform. So if I went into my new transform things that show up here, now I have the ability to rotate them one at a time or move them up and down by position Y or X. So it's a little more, manual, but it allows you to get that precise eyebrow position you want. And even better, you could add these into your layout down here. So if I wanted to change, position Y or rotation or anything like that, I could hook these all up, go back to perform, and now when I move this, it's going to change the position. I probably want to scale that in a little bit to something like -200 and 200 just to keep it a little bit more reined in so it's not flying too far off the face. That's a little bit better. And rotation, I could probably do the same thing. But you see how these little elements give you a lot of precise control, and you could actually hook up all of these to a MIDI device and have them all work at the same time. So if you wanted MIDI to raise and rotate the eyebrow and change the opacity and do 20 other things at the same time, you could do that. And I think we're going to see more complicated rigging systems as time goes on of people hooking up multiple facial features or multiple actions to single controls. And that adds a lot of really cool control possibilities. All right, that's it for this month. Thank you very much for watching. And as usual, if you have any questions or run into rigging issues as you're working with Character Animator, the best place to get help is the official Character Animator forums. Also, if you are making cool stuff, we'd love to hear about it. Put it on social media with hashtag Character Animator or tweet it to me at OKSamurai. All right, that's it for this episode. Happy 2017, and we'll see you next year.